Yeah, I guess one question that's always on the table in situations like that is like this is how can I learn about what I need to know to learn what I need to know. What?
Can you please repeat this?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that myself. So like let's say I know you, and if I know you, I know what I have to ask you to know more. If I don't know you, I don't even know how to start asking. If I have already learned what it means to learn about gardening, I know whom to contact to ask more about plants. If I haven't even learned how to approach learning about gardening, I'm just standing there looking at the shrubbery and thinking like, oh my god, this also looks just so green to me. So every moment you want to gather, you want to get into something, you need to have someone help you understand what it even means to get into stuff. I mean, I have some manuals in my collections that have a section that say how to use this manual. So that you always need some kind of additional input to even know what to do with the input you may or may not get after that. And it's just like, what's the primer? What's the first cue? What's the first clue that I walk into an exhibition? How am I going to take this? What do I need to know to understand what there is to know in this place? What do I need to learn to understand what there is to be learned, and how? I mean, everybody teaches everything. Like, somebody's loud, somebody's silent. What do I need to understand to put myself into a place where I can start understanding stuff? And that's an eternal problem. And that's why people perform initiations, I guess. Like okay, if there's a secret knowledge, it's not just that the knowledge is secret, but that the pathway to that knowledge is secret. Like, all sacred knowledge is somehow protected by a modality that you have to learn about it. Meet me on the third day when the moon is in the, I don't know, fifth house, and under these constellations you will be in a place to understand what's going to happen. So is there any knowledge that would not presuppose a ritual of being initiated into the way of acquiring that knowledge? We always take that for granted because we are constantly surrounded by all these rituals and ceremonies of like openings, practices of finding your way around a university, around a school, or whatever. Like, all of these are basically initiation rituals that are introducing you certain ways to go about knowing. Each compulsive in their own right.
We had a discussion before about transgression
Mm.
and purity, maybe,
Mm.
and policing
Mm.
within educational environments. And there was there was two examples that represented two different kind of potential constellations in which transgression would have different meanings, maybe, or a different kind of acceptance. And we talked about the way in which, in an environment in which people come from very different backgrounds, so to say, meaning professionally but also nationally somehow, certain rules are very much external and have to be discussed and have to be defended kind of on a daily basis, maybe until something like a community actually starts to grow and maybe starts to develop its own kind of system of knowledge and rules, and there is communities, or there is like environments, for example educational ones, in which there is a certain kind of common sense, like the rules but also the knowledge, for example societal but also social, like purely social knowledge is kind of like more internal, because maybe people come from a more similar background or kind of relate to the same kind of system, almost legal system in some kind of way. And I have made the experience that transgression, even though these external, like these systems in which certain rules are very much external, meaning to be discussed, meaning to be shaped by oneself somehow. This sounds very much like a, not utopian, but like an environment which has the potential for being progressive and like consciously making one's own rules that haven't existed before. So it's like could be also a counter position to some other legal systems, or also societal or national systems, or state systems. But at the same time, it's very hard to not only start to work on a moral system in which like there is a demand for purity, because how can one somehow integrate transgression within a system that is so much about still finding itself as a working functioning one, and a one in which everyone seems like wants to be like to have respect and wants to be equal, but still there has to be dirt, or like, but it is exactly this kind of transgression which is almost impossible to integrate, especially in these systems in the making.
Yeah, well, especially when your transgression is not my transgression, and which could in principle be like a fantastic utopian scenario where like your transgression is not my transgression. Maybe I don't even notice that you're transgressing. Yeah?
Or my transgression isn't yours, or your transgression isn't mine, so I transgress all the time without noticing.
Yeah, and I'm maybe totally fine with it, or I'm just completely upset about it, but there's maybe... I mean, on the one hand, you could say as long as there's no common protocol, there is infinite possibilities for mutual annoyance. But there could also be a heavily scenario where you have the most annoying people of the world together in one room, but each is transgressing in such a way that the other person just considers it completely a matter of course. Yeah? Okay, that's what you do. You have a thing with sharks. Yeah? I don't know, like sometimes it seems like as children of modernity, we got taught that there needs to be one protocol, one social contract that people need to be initiated into to start recognizing each other as equals. And as long as we don't have one common, if we are already initiated into it from kindergarten onwards, then okay, we recognize each other based on a contract that we have already completely internalized. And if there's new people in the kindergarten, we have to make sure, and then comes the terrible word, that everybody gets integrated, which just means like I'm going to initiate you into my kindergarten protocol based on the kind of noble assumption, pseudo-noble assumption that once we are all initiated to the same protocol, then we can recognize each other as equals. Not recognizing in that moment that all initiation is violent, and all initiation produces scars, that are then passed off as contractual signatures. Yes, you've been through the same shit, hence we understand each other and recognize each other as equals. Usually, I mean, that's also traditional university education. No, everybody spends a certain amount of years of their life in a place where you listen to somebody who doesn't make any sense, but at least everybody has listened to the same person, makes jokes about the same professor, and then maybe some of them go on to be exactly that professor in the future. That allows other people to make jokes about that person, because you just continue a reinscription of the same contract for the simple sake that everybody can then cheat on that contract, joke about that contract, be in that contract, and if they transgress, at least it's a recognized transgression on these grounds. And do we really have to perpetuate that kind of thinking? On the one hand, I cannot deny that some initiation, when I get to know somebody, I might need to get initiated into the way how they look at the world. What's good, what's bad. I can't put a handbag on the floor, I must put it up somewhere. Handbag shouldn't touch floor. I learn, I realize I offended somebody because I put the handbag on the floor. So no, I won't do that again. I've been initiated, I've understood that contract is that is something that in getting to know one another you have to learn. Yes, sure. Absolutely, but could there not also be a space? Is it necessarily a space of not knowing if we don't need to forcefully initiate each other into whatever secret our universe is built around? And sometimes I'm old-fashioned, but I still think about the metropolis, an urban space as a place where I don't need to know your secret. Well, you have something with sharks, I have something with kind of keyboards. I don't know. Hey, good morning, how you doing? And then, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what I am thinking about when I'm listening to you, and of course it was quite dense what you just said, is what is the basis of understanding? Because we want to be equals in difference.
Yeah.
So not indifferent. Decidedly not indifferent, but indifference. So. But do we actually clear the ground for this in terms of do we actually have to find or discuss or announce a basis of understanding? Isn't it beautiful not to understand each other, but to meet each other, to actually encounter each other without having the need to understand, and which also leads me back to, do you know what I mean? What we talked about before. The girl with the 3 faces. And I think there is something initially, there's something very intriguing in the idea in the feeling of being understood. But at the same time, it's always an imagination, of course, which in a way, by feeling understood, one kind of stays with oneself. And I think in a way of not being understood, whatever that means, or not feeling understood necessarily, also kind of challenges oneself to maybe make room for surprise again, or a certain kind of encounter without purpose, maybe.
No, I'm completely on the fence about that. On the one hand, is exactly what I would argue for, in a big city environment where you have ways of saying, good morning to one another that just acknowledges the presence of the other person, and then you go separate ways. And if there's an encounter, fine. If not, it's just, I don't know, street corner Brooklyn, whatever. You move past each other, just acknowledge each other's presence.
Or maybe it's I have a shark, you have a shark, we both like sharks, and this is what we share, But the rest, maybe we don't, and that's also fine. But sometimes it's only the shark, and this is what it's about.
Yeah, for real, yeah, absolutely.
And it's the beauty can be in the detail or in the moment also. It doesn't have to be the entirety of I don't want to say identity or like the entirety of like a person or something that one has to agree with or understand or something. It maybe just, I don't know. I mean, we are navigating around each other carefully already, so.
Yeah, but it doesn't. Then the question is, of course, if that's not a romanticized version of urban life, because life can also be extremely violent, and the question is are we not also there presupposing a contract precisely of respect, no? That allow you to keep your distance, and like, you know, my shark, your shark. We don't have to get into the same shark pit. We may, but we don't have to. But that is already maybe based on a protocol of distance and respect, where my family and your family don't need to fight over the same, I don't know, piece of ground. I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, is there kind of a minima moralia, like a minimal ethics of, you know, respect?
I just wanted to ask you actually, what is the difference? Because I think I'm less concerned with the word ethics than moral. But it seems like moral already includes a certain kind of just, like I said, judgment maybe. And moral also sounds very like religious to me somehow. And it sounds like something that is kind of sad rather than still in the process of, you know, being shaped. And an ethic, like ethic feels like to me, but I don't know about the roots of this term, but it feels like something to me which can also be like any kind of constellation or any kind of realm can kind of like probably develop its own ethics. This is kind of how it seems.
Yeah, I would completely go along with that. I feel like morality for me is a question of convention and hence of representation. Like a morality can be spelled out, it can be in a book, it can be kind of in a mission statement, exists on the level of representation. And then you will have other authorities that teach you how to learn about morals. You go to Sunday school, or somebody has the authority to teach to you what's been written down. And I feel like ethics is not, it doesn't exist in representation. Ethics is always on first base. There is not, it's just in how people figure stuff out. It exists in that first space of learning how to learn about another person, whether to back off or to get closer. I feel like it's much more immanent and dynamic. Whether in the end for a legal framework you need stuff to be written out because you can't perpetually negotiate each and every little step in civil life. Yes, I do understand that there's a reason for laws and representations, but I would see that more as a pragmatic necessity, a practical necessity. I just get very nervous when people look for these representations as answers to stuff, when maybe so it's a certain stabilizing legal framework, but then we still need some experience or ethics to understand how to even interpret that framework. Like there needs to be a good jury to understand what the law means in relation to a particular case, and if the jury is sort of biased, then you can also forget the law. So yeah. Well,
I think law, like the fun part about law is that it's like highly interpretable.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's it's basically just not even a basis of understanding. It's just like the playground on which something is built up, which isn't even considered a truth, which is just considered like an agreement, so to say.
Including, I mean, taxes is the same thing, no? Which on the other hand gives the people who then are experienced in performing the script enormous power, no? And technically anybody could do it, but the more complicated the script gets, the moral script get, the text script get, the law script get, the more privileged also the person will be who can even navigate that representation, or is initiated officially into that representation in order to be able to perform a reading of it. I mean, obviously, a lot of people look at art in the same way, that we're all just a bunch of wankers looking at in unreadable script and with the privilege to act as if we knew it and performing the text for others. And I'm never too sure that, of course, it's easy to produce the parody of exactly that. Like, okay, let's be two strange Germans reading the text and performing